So today we will continue with the anti-diabetic drugs. We have already discussed the insulin, its preparations, delivery devices and alternative routes. I have already given you the classification of anti-diabetic drugs. Majority of these drugs are used by oral route. Only one group is injectable. So broadly speaking, we say oral anti-diabetic. They include drugs enhancing insulin secretion by two mechanisms. One is by binding to the sulfonylurea receptors. This includes first and second generation sulfonylureas, meglitinides, and D-phenylalanine derivative natiglinide. And second group which increases the insulin secretion is those drugs which act like incretins and those which inhibit the metabolism of incretins. This is GLP-1 receptor agonists and DPP-4 inhibitors. Now this GLP-1 receptor agonists are incretin analogs. They are peptides in nature, so they have to be used by subcutaneous injection. Exenatide, liraglutide, they are injectables. Rest all drugs in the anti-diabetic are possible to be given by oral route. Then we have seen the drugs having primary action on the liver, muscle or adipose tissue, those which act like insulin. They are not insulin secretagogues, but they act like insulin. This group includes biguanides and thiazolidinediones. And then we have drugs which decrease the absorption of insulin. This group is alpha glucosidase inhibitors. Miscellaneous drugs include sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors, amylin mimetics, D2 agonist, bile acid sequestrant resin. So now we will discuss details of each and every group of anti-diabetic drugs. Previously, the term used for these drugs was oral hypoglycemics, but now it is seen that all of them do not cause hypoglycemia. Some are euglycemics, that is, they reduce the raised blood glucose to the normal levels, but risk of hypoglycemia is not there, or is least, very less risk of hypoglycemia with some groups. So the term has been modified from hypoglycemics to anti-diabetics. First group in oral antidiabetics is sulfonylureas. Now if you remember the mechanism of secretion of insulins in response to glucose, we have mentioned sulfonylureas there. These drugs are insulin secretagogues. They increase the release of insulin. They bind with a high affinity receptor present on ATP regulated potassium channels on the beta cells of pancreas, and they close the potassium channels. Therefore, they interfere with the efflux of potassium ions. So when potassium ions are not moving out, membrane gets depolarized, calcium influx occurs, and preformed insulin is released. Now as these drugs are capable of increasing the release of insulin, there is risk of hypoglycemia as an adverse effect. So sulfonylureas, here you can draw the same diagram we discussed with insulin release in response to glucose. These sulfonylureas close the potassium channels, ATP regulated potassium channels, cause membrane depolarization and insulin is released. Now as they involve the release of insulin from the beta cells, So for the action of sulfonylureas, at least 30% of beta cells should be functional. So these drugs will not be effective in type 1 diabetes where beta cells are damaged. At least 30% beta cells should be functional. They should be synthesizing insulin that can be released by the drug. In addition to insulin releasing action, sulfonylureas suppress the levels of glucagon. They increase the insulin receptors present on the target cells, especially liver. So not only the secretion is increased, the response to insulin is also increased. The drugs like glipizide, gliclazide and glimepiride, they increase the sensitivity of peripheral tissues to insulin. Now, with regards to their status in the treatment of diabetes mellitus, nowadays only second generation sulfonylureas are being used. The first generation tolbutamide and chlorpropamide. Tolbutamide is infrequently used, whereas chlorpropamide is not used because of the following disadvantages. Chlorpropamide is long acting, hence there is risk of prolonged hypoglycemia, and the risk is more in the elderly population. Chlorpropamide can cause disulfiram reaction with alcohol as it inhibits the enzyme aldehyde dehydrogenase. So there is accumulation of formaldehyde which causes the disulfiram, various signs symptoms of disulfiram reaction. Acetaldehyde is accumulated when ethanol metabolism is inhibited. Other adverse effects seen with chlorpropamide are hyponatremia, rashes, photosensitivity reactions, blood dyscrasias and cholestatic jaundice. So chlorpropamide is not much in use. Other first generation drug tolbutamide is infrequently used, and it is the second generation sulfonylureas, glipizide, gliclazide, glibenclamide which are in use. The adverse effects of second generation drugs are lesser as compared to first generation, and they include, first and foremost again, is hypoglycemia. So sulfonylureas are hypoglycemic agents as they are increasing the secretion of insulin as well as they are increasing the sensitivity of peripheral tissues to insulin. If severe hypoglycemia occurs, it presents as coma, especially with long-acting drugs like glibenclamide and in elderly patients. Sulfonylureas can cause fluid retention, weight gain and edema. Other ADRs are nausea, vomiting, flatulence, diarrhea or constipation, headache, paresthesias. So ADRs of sulfonylureas. This is a common question. Enumerate the adverse drug reactions of sulfonylureas. Hypoglycemia, hypoglycemic coma can occur, weight gain due to fluid retention, nausea, vomiting, flatulence, GI disturbance in the form of either diarrhea or constipation, headache and paresthesias. Obese type 2 diabetics are resistant to insulin, so the efficacy is less. They can cross the placental barrier causing fetal or neonatal hypoglycemia, So they are not useful in gestational diabetes also. Other drugs are preferred. Many drugs can increase or decrease the effect of sulfonylureas. There are important interactions. So those drugs which enhance the action of sulfonylureas, they will definitely cause hypoglycemia. So some drugs can displace sulfonylureas from the drugs can displace sulfonylurea from the plasma protein binding site. So more of the drug is available in the free form and the action is enhanced, resulting in hypoglycemia. These drugs which are competing with sulfonylureas for the binding sites include sulfonamides, salicylates, phenylbutazone, sulfonamide, etc. Some drugs can inhibit the metabolism and excretion. They include sulfonamides, ketoconazole, antifungal drug, warfarin, chloramphenicol. Some drugs synergize with the pharmacodynamic action. The pharmacodynamic action is insulin secretion. So some drugs synergize with its action and enhance its action. They include propranolol, salicylates, sympatholytic drugs which are used as antihypertensives, lithium and theophylline. So we have to be careful when these drugs are co-administered along with any of the sulfonylureas. In contrast, the drugs which decrease the action of sulfonylureas will interfere with the control of diabetic situation. The situation will be poorly controlled. They are enzyme inducers. There will be more metabolism of sulfonylurea, phenobarbital, phenytoin, alcoholism, chronic alcoholism and rifampicin. And there are many other examples of enzyme inducers which will increase the metabolism of sulfonylurea. Hence their action will be reduced. Their efficacy will be reduced. Some drugs oppose the action of insulin, thiazides, corticosteroids, furosemide, oral contraceptives. They oppose insulin action. So that was about the sulfonylureas, which is first among the drugs increasing the release of insulin by binding with sulfonylurea receptor on ATP regulated potassium channel. Second group, increasing the insulin secretion by binding with the same receptors, though to a different site than sulfonylureas. These are meglitinides. You can get a short note on any individual member or on the group as such. Meglitinides or ripaglinide or mitiglinide are the members. Their mechanism of action is same as sulfonylureas, that is, they are blockers of ATP regulated potassium channels present on beta cells. Therefore, they close these channels, they interfere with efflux of potassium that results in depolarization of membrane, that opens the calcium channels, that causes inflow of calcium, increase in intracellular calcium and ultimately insulin release. So ripaglinide, mitiglinide, their action is same as sulfonylureas. their absorption from the GIT is quick. So anything which is rapidly absorbed will have fast onset of action. Fast onset, rapidly their effect appears, and they are metabolized rapidly. Quickly absorbed, resulting in fast onset, and rapidly metabolized, resulting in short duration. If the drug is rapidly metabolized, its action will last for a shorter duration. So if the action lasts for shorter duration, we will use it for quick and short lasting action for mealtime glucose raise. After the meals, postprandial, there is a spike in the glucose levels, so that can be controlled by these fast onset short acting drugs. Why onset is fast? Because they are absorbed rapidly and they are metabolized rapidly by hepatic metabolism. So these drugs are used for control of mealtime hyperglycemia. That is the major difference or the key point. If you want to write a short note on meglitinides, you must remember that they are used for postprandial hyperglycemia because they are short lasting and fast in onset. So as expected, they are useful in selected patients of type 2 diabetes who have postprandial hyperglycemia. We give the drug before each meal so that after the meals the hyperglycemia is not disturbing. So it is logical that if one is expecting to miss the meal, he should omit the dose also. Otherwise, there will be hypoglycemia. They can be used to supplement the effects of metformin and long-acting insulins also. Some patients on metformin or on long-acting insulin preparations otherwise remain in the euglycemic range, but after the meals there occurs hyperglycemia that can be controlled by adding the meglitinides. But one should be careful that if meal is to be missed, those should be omitted. Otherwise there will be risk of hypoglycemia. Major adverse effects of meglitinides include headache, arthralgia, weight gain, and dyspepsia. Dyspepsia is gastritis type of symptoms, abdominal bloating. In general, risk of hypoglycemia is lesser as compared to sulfonylureas because they have short duration of action. And because they are highly metabolized in the liver, there is a caution. They should be avoided in patients with hepatic diseases. Meglitinides. Key point, same mechanism of action as sulfonylureas. Only difference is they are fast in onset and shorter acting, so preferred in postprandial hyperglycemia. Risk of hypoglycemia is less if you omit the dose on missing the meal. These are other ADRs. Another drug which acts by the same mechanism of increasing the insulin release after binding to sulfonylurea receptors is the D-phenylalanine analog, which is neteglinide. Mechanism of action is same. If you want to revise it, if you get a short note on neteglinide, then you will not write that it has mechanism of action same as ripeglin, but you will mention the mechanism here, that it binds with the receptor present on the ATP regulated potassium channels, closes the channels, causes membrane depolarization, opening of calcium channel, calcium entry, increased intracellular calcium, and release of insulin. It limits postprandial hyperglycemia but little effect on the fasting levels. Again, its onset of action and duration of action are faster than repaglinide also. Has faster onset, shorter duration. So we give it 10 minutes before the meals to control the postprandial hyperglycemia. We usually combine it with other antidiabetics in which postprandial hyperglycemia is the problem. We can combine with metformin, we can combine with others. Risk of hypoglycemia is again less because of its shorter duration. ADRs that can occur is dizziness, nausea, flu-like symptoms, and arthralgia. So till now we have discussed three groups: sulfonylureas, which are first and second generation. First generation are not used, not much in use because of many adverse effects. Second generation are used but they have risk of hypoglycemia. Then we discussed meglitinides. Meglitinides are faster in onset and have short duration of action, so have lesser risk of hypoglycemia as compared to sulfonylureas. Though if patient takes the drug and misses the meal, then hypoglycemia can occur. Whereas D-phenylalanine analogues have onset of action faster and duration of action shorter than meglitinides. So these last two groups, meglitinides and D-phenylalanine analogues, nataglinide, they are useful for postprandial hyperglycemia. This was first group of the drugs which increase insulin secretion by binding with the receptor present on ATP regulated potassium channels. Three groups. Next is drugs which increase the insulin secretion by mimicking or prolonging the action of incretins. So this incretin is the key word. The drugs which increase the action of incretin or prolong the action of incretin, or drugs which themselves act like incretin, they mimic the effect of incretin. So for that you will have to understand what incretin is, what are its major actions, how those actions are useful in a diabetic patient. These drugs also increase the release of insulin. Now this incretins are the gut hormones which are released in response to oral glucose. Whenever glucose is ingested by oral route from the gut, these incretins are released. They include GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, and the second one is glucose dependent insulinotropic peptide. It is dependent on glucose, means it is released in response to oral glucose. Glucose dependent, when oral glucose is taken, this thing is secreted, and it is insulinotropic peptide. It favors the insulin, but either it will increase the release or it will favor the action. GIP. Now in humans, the first one, glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1, is more important. Now, what are the actions? They amplify the glucose induced insulin secretion. Now, we have discussed that the most important insulin secretagogue is glucose, and it is observed that the insulin secretion in response to IV glucose is less as compared to insulin secretion in response to oral glucose. Are you getting my point? Glucose causes insulin secretion, whether we give it by IV route or by oral route, right? But glucose, when used by oral route, causes more insulin secretion. Effect of oral glucose on insulin secretion is more as compared to effect of IV glucose, though both increase the secretion of insulin, but effect is more when it is used by oral route. And who is responsible for this thing? The incretins. The incretins amplify or enhance the release of insulin in response to glucose, and incretins are released when glucose is taken by oral route. So response to oral glucose is more in comparison to response to IV glucose. Is that clear? Incretins like GLP-1 and GIP, they amplify the glucose induced insulin secretion. GLP-1 receptors, glucagon-like peptide 1 receptors, are present on alpha cells where they decrease the glucagon release. They are present on beta cells where they increase the insulin release in response to glucose. Now, this in response to glucose is very important, because if glucose levels are high, there will be more insulin release. If glucose levels are less, there will be less insulin release. So risk of hypoglycemia is less. You can compare this thing with the first group we have discussed. Sulfonylureas, they cause insulin release. That's it. Here I am saying they cause insulin release in response to glucose, means if glucose levels are very high, this release will be much more. If glucose levels are not that high, this response will be comparatively less. So they do not cause insulin release irrespective of glucose. They consider the levels of glucose and then release insulin. That is why the risk of hypoglycemia is not much with the drugs which mimic the action of incretins, because incretins increase insulin response appropriate for the glucose levels or in response to the glucose. Is that clear? Can you make out the difference from the first group, sulfonylureas, which increase insulin release? Here insulin release increased appropriate for glucose levels. So risk of hypoglycemia is comparatively less. Incretins also act on GI mucosa where they delay the gastric emptying, slow down the nutrient absorption, so appetite is decreased and weight loss may also occur. They also act on hypothalamus where they decrease the appetite, causing weight loss. So this is incretin we are discussing. After exerting these actions on the GLP-1 receptors on alpha cells by decreasing glucagon increasing insulin, decreasing the appetite, causing weight loss, etc. After exerting the action, the incretins or GLP-1 is metabolized by an enzyme known as dipeptidyl peptidase 4. GLP or incretin released from gut in response to oral glucose exerts these actions, and then its action is terminated by this enzyme. So what are the drugs which can exert such actions? Either they will be GLP-1 analogs which act like GLP, they mimic the action of GLP, or they will be dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzyme inhibitors, so that GLP-1 acts for a longer time. As it is not metabolized, this enzyme is inhibited, GLP-1 is not metabolized, so it keeps on exerting these actions for a longer time. So GLP-1 receptor agonists, I discussed. GLP-1 receptors are present on alpha cells, beta cells, GI mucosa and hypothalamus. So what are the drugs? These are exenatide, liraglutide, LB-glutide and dulaglutide. Exenatide, liraglutide, LB-glutide and dulaglutide. Now this exenatide is a long-acting analog of GLP-1. Why long-acting? Because it is resistant to metabolism by DPP-4 enzyme, as it has a glycine substitution which makes it resistant to metabolism, so it keeps on acting for a longer time. It is an analog of glucagon-like peptide 1. Now as it is a peptide, it is not effective by oral route because it will be broken down by proteolytic enzymes. Hence it is given by subcutaneous route. Though we are discussing it with oral antidiabetics, but this group GLP-1 receptor agonists being peptides, they are used by subcutaneous route. Exenatide is long acting. So it acts on GLP-1 receptors present on here beta cells, where they increase insulin secretion in response to glucose levels. On alpha cells, they decrease the glucagon secretion. On GI mucosa, they delay gastric emptying, so patient remains full for a longer time. Absorption of the nutrients is reduced, appetite is reduced, and on hypothalamus, they also decrease the appetite and cause weight loss. Exenatide is approved by FDA for use as adjunctive therapy in patients where glycemic control with metformin used alone or along with sulfonylureas is not appropriate, where metformin alone or these two groups used together are not being able to provide optimum glycemic control, then we can add this group as adjunctive therapy. Benefit is they decrease the postprandial and fasting blood glucose levels, they decrease weight, and they decrease HbA1c, glycated hemoglobin. ADRs that can occur includes anorexia, see the action, these two actions, anorexia, nausea, vomiting, but these symptoms decrease with time. Now, when we use them alone, the risk of hypoglycemia with exenatide is lesser as compared to sulfonylureas, because we have seen that from the beta cells they cause insulin release in response to glucose. If there is more glucose, there will be more release of insulin. If there is less glucose, there will be less release of insulin. Other drugs in this group are glutide. Its half-life is 5 days, so once a week. Liraglutide, once daily. Dulaglutide, again weekly subcutaneous injection. ADRs, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Now, an important risk with these GLP-1 agonists is risk of pancreatitis. So, patients should be warned that if they have unexplained persistent pain in the abdomen, they should seek medical advice. Renal impairment may occur, and it is seen that in rodents there are parafollicular tumors with these drugs. So, what is the risk in humans is not clearly known, but they should not be used in patients having past history or family history of medullary thyroid cancer or multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, where there are parafollicular cells involved. If there is past history or family history, we should better avoid these drugs, because in rodents they stimulate these tumors. So after that we are left with DPP-4 inhibitors and the drugs like biguanides, which favor the actions of insulin, the drugs like alpha glucosidase inhibitors, and uh, the miscellaneous drugs we will discuss briefly in the next class. Thank you.